Right, so welcome again to this series of NestJS. So this is part 2 of the video. Well, in this video we'll be setting up the database. We'll be setting up the type RM, and we'll also save to the database, and we'll also retrieve from the database. All right, so we are doing all that in this video. Right. So I'm creating this video because we have now hit the 100 views. Nevertheless, people are still, you're still not commenting. I need your comments, I need your feedback, because that's what keep me going. In addition to that, I've noticed that a lot of my viewers have not yet subscribed, so please hit the subscribe button, because that actually keeps me going, and you can click on the bell icon to actually be notified whenever I create a new video. But anyways, to get down to what we are supposed to do today, so I'll create a simple notepad so that we can keep track of what we'll do, right? Okay, so what we'll do, basically, we'll set up the database. Just set up the database. We'll set up type ORM. Okay, so set up entity. Entity, the entity will be for our to-dos, right? To-dos. We'll also set up our DTOs. After that, we'll create our CLUD operations. All right, and not to forget that we'll also create our louts. Okay. All right, so basically this is what we're going to do in this video. All right, so I usually pack a lot of things in one video because of time issues. All right, so I try to do as much as I can in one particular video. So let's start up. All right, so first of all, we want to set up the database. All right, so we want to set up our database. So this is our program. Right, this is the program that we were doing in the last video. So if you haven't watched the last video, I strongly advise you to actually watch the last video, the previous video, because what happens is I'm simply transitioning from that video to this video. All right, so everything else that we did in that video, we are carrying on to this video. All right, so let's continue. So we'll set up a database, right? So there are different ways how you can actually set up a database, right? You can use MongoDB, you can use Postgres, you can use MySQL. There is a lot of ways how you can actually create your local database, right? So this is how things work, right? When you're developing on your local machine, you create a database, right? So umabanga database. So database you umabanga create it is running on your local machine, right? Now what happens ukamaza panga deploy website yako ija, ndiyeno ukamaza panga deploy website yako ija umayiza no an online database. All right, so database imakhala different from your current database in a sort kuti yako imakhala idakali pa local machine, iyo imakhala kuti ya online. Then ukapita online muja umakapanga set up all the database and stuff, and then ukapanga deploy application yako ija, now ukamapanga save ku database izipanga save ku online database ija. Okay, so these things will make sense in time coming, because project imwe lupanga vai ifika kuti mpakati panga deploy, right? So in essence, I just want to give you an overview of what happens, like how the database works. Because when I was back in second year, I used to have such ideas. Wouldn't they? How am I going to get my local database on the online? So yeah, that's basically it. Like, think of it like you might accept a database. All you do is change database connection. Could application language isabangi connect ku local database kumwe bangi connect to that online database. Okay, so let's set up a database. So personally I like to use XAMPP, which is based on my SQL, right? So I use this one because it's easy to actually set up, and as a matter of fact it has an interface that's relatively easy to actually work with. So first things first, you have to install XAMPP, right? So go online and just search for XAMPP. You go to XAMPP, right? So XAMPP is the most popular PHP development environment. Well, they're calling about PHP. Well, we are not going to do all the PHP stuff. We just want their database, the database, right? All we want is the database. So this is everything else about XAMPP. So you download here for Windows. Apparently, I won't install again because I already have it. So installation process, ngobanga follow the entire installation process. It's a normal installation process. It's a graphical user interface. Just follow everything else. You'll be done. And once you're finished installing, you will have to learn the XAMPP control panel, which is XAMPP. For some reason, the icon is not there. Right, so you open the XAMPP control panel, you click Windows, and you simply search XAMPP. You open the control panel, right? So here's my control panel, all open and stuff. So I'll start my SQL server, and I'll start the Apache server. All right, that's where my database will be running. So now that I've started all these two, right, now I can actually freely create my database. Okay, so you make sure you start my SQL, because the database we'll be using is my SQL, and you also need to learn the Apache server, right? Because the database will need to run on a particular server. So what we are doing here, I'm actually turning my PC into a database server. All right, that's what I'm doing right here. Okay, now how can I access the dashboard? So to access the dashboard for PHP, you run PHP my admin. Just search online. Just search online. PHP my admin. Then you go by localhost right there. Then you look one of these URLs. This one is continuously loading. Let's try this one. Okay, so the 8080, not the 8080. Let's try the 80. Let me open that in a new tab. Right, so there we go. So it's the 80, the one with an 80. So as you have seen, it has opened a PHP my admin database dashboard, right? If it didn't bring you to this dashboard, you can simply look for wherever it says PHP my admin database, whatever, something like that, right? So it has opened the dashboard. So this is my dashboard, right? So what what you do in the database, let's create a new database. We create a new database. Let's give it a name. I'll call this database to do app DB, right? That's the name for the database, and I'll save. And now, just like that, the database is created. Okay, so I have my database right there. So this is my database, my to-do app DB. All right, so my database currently it has literally nothing, right? It has nothing in it. Okay. For you to see how things actually look like, I have this database right here. Right, so when you create that, you have all the different tables in there. All the different tables in there. But currently for us, we have just started, so we basically have no tables in there. Okay, so what we have done here is we have created our database using my SQL and XAMPP, and we have started up. We have made our local machine to behave as a database server using XAMPP. Okay, so that being said, the first part we are done. So the next step is that we should set up type or IAM, right? Should set up type or IAM. So what does type or IAM do, right? So what type or IAM do is that it helps abstraction. It helps in abstraction. What it does, in essence, right? Tikamapanga create our database for our backend applications, right? Ku database kuja kumakhala what we call my queries, right? Kumakhala ma queries. So these guys are khala pansi anaona kuti let's keep programming for the backend. Everything, let's keep it in a programming sense. What am I trying to mean? They try to make you to no longer write those queries yourself, right? You should not write those queries yourself. They wanted everything else to be in code, right? So what it does, what TypeORM does, it will create ma entities ako ku database aja imapanga represent kukodi wao kujanga ma classes. So what you do is uzingopanga create ma classes, all right? So ukapanga run your application yako ija yoka imakakupangira create ma tables yo kujani ku database. So yoka imapanga run ma queries aja, right? Achina create table whatever kena imapanga create yoka ma fields yokaika ma parameters osiyana if they are foreign keys and primary keys yoka ipanga set. Okay, you web programmer jo mavanga, you just create a class, okay, a class for that. So that's what TypeORM does. Okay, so it is there to simplify interaction with the database, how we work with our databases. All right, so let's see what we're actually trying to say. Okay, so let's open the documentation, and let's open the documentation. Let's NestJS type ORM right there. Okay, so NestJS type ORM. We open the first link. Let's see what's there. Okay, so in this link they are talking about my databases, right? Where they are using actually TypeORM integration. Where they're using TypeORM. Here they're talking about how you integrate TypeORM into your project. Okay, so let's follow these steps and integrate our TypeORM. So we'll open our program, which is this notepad. I open bash here and I open VS Code right there. Okay, so this is the VS Code right there. All right, so let's run our program. npm run dev. Right, so we are running our program in development mode. All right, so it's taking some time. So it's npm start dev. Okay, npm run. Okay, so while this terminal is actually running our server, I'll create another terminal for our installations. And I know, Antenna, you like using terminal VS Code Gonkuno. That does no harm. You can also do the same. For me, I like to keep my terminals separate, just like I've done. Right, so let's run the installations. So first of all, we'll actually integrate TypeORM using this very first command, TypeORM for my SQL Health. So we'll copy that and let's paste it. Okay. Right, so now that it has completed installing using the npm install, so now it means that we now have TypeORM installed in our project. So we need to begin to use it. So first of all, we must configure our project with TypeORM. So first of all, let's create the configurations to our database right here. Right? Let's create our database configurations. So what we'll do is we'll create a separate file for this. Okay, well, for example, in the documentation they're adding it app module. Well, this is fine, but we can also create our own external file or module, right, where we can simply just import it into different places where we need our database connection, right? So let's create our database configuration. So what we'll do is we'll create it in the root directory. All right, so we'll call it type rm config. So type, let's use type rm config.ts. Right, so in our file we'll actually create, let's create a simple variable const type rm const type rm config, right, of type rm module options. Type rm module options right there. Right, so this is for setting up the configurations. So it is equal to, right, so what we'll do here is we can actually copy all these configurations right here, all these configuration options. So we copy them and we can paste them right there. Okay, so all this information right here should be as that which we have already created. So if we go back to our php admin, okay, we'll not go back. Manual, if you remember pretty well, the port was 3306. The port was 3306 for MySQL, right? They're using MySQL, it's localhost. The port is that. The username, you leave it as root. The password, we never set any password. I think we just leave it as root. So for the database, we know that that is our, we got that to do app db, right? So here doing this, we have actually set up the connection. So let's use the connection in our application. So to do that, we actually go to our app.module, okay, which is our root module. All right, so in our app.module, let's add this line of code right here. Okay, so in the imports, we import type rm module for root. Okay, so this is making type rm available in all. All right, there we go, type rm for root. All right, so we pass in our type rm config right there. So now type rm, wait, we didn't export our configurations, we missed the part. So let's okay, so we missed this part, so let's actually export our configurations. Let's simply just add an export here, export, right, so that we can actually use it in different files like the app module. So we go type rm config, there we go. So it has also import right here, it's imported, and we have actually introduced it into our entire program, right? So now we have linked our database configuration, right, our MySQL database configuration with our application through the root module, the root app module. Right, so what we should do next, okay, so there's setting up entities, right? So before we set up the entity, let's create our whole to do component, right? So we have different ways. We can actually just add all the logic into the present component, which is the app component, but you're not going to do that. Let's complicate things a little bit. Okay, so what we'll do is you open your bash or terminal. So let's do nest g resource. So let's create to do. Right, so what this does, it creates a resource which is to do. All right, so invalid command to do. Okay, I think it's resource. Okay, let's just check the command. So it's nests resource. Okay, so it's nest g resource. Okay, so nest g resource command only generates all NestJS building blocks, module DS controller classes, but also entity class, DDO, and whatnot. Okay, so you do ng resource users. Okay, so we don't need this g nest g resource to do. So let's create the to do resource. Okay, so Tabanga create the to do resource. So in src we have now the to do resource, which is this. So we don't need these other files. We don't need these other files. These are simply files for testing. We are not going to do that right now. We don't need to test our program. We are very certain that it will work as expected. So as you can see, the resource command has created the entities folder, right? So this is where we'll create our to do entity, and it has also created our DTO, okay? A DTO for creating and a DTO for updating, okay? So what the DTO is, it's simply there for actually transferring of data, right? So when we want to transfer data between components or services, we'll be using the DTO, right? So it provides that interface for sharing data. You appreciate it as we go along. So these are the entity folder, and this is the DTO. Okay, so next step is let's set up the entity for the to do, right? So we'll go into the entities folder, right? And here is where we'll set up the entity. So remember when I said with type rm, what we'll be doing is that we'll be creating classes which will be corresponding to our entities or tables in our database. Okay, so this is the first step of doing such, right? So we'll create the entire database schema, or I mean the table schema in here, which will be reflected whenever our server starts. Okay, so let's create the schema for our to do. So basically what we are doing here, in other words, we are creating a table. Okay, a table for our to do. Okay, so what we know is, first of all, we need to have a primary key, right? So we call it primary column, text no argument. We'll call it to do ID. Okay, so this primary column will be of type string. Okay, or you can put it as a number. Okay, right there. And we'll have another column for, let's say, the title. So you use the decorator column. Alright, so the decorators we talked of earlier, these are also some of the decorators. This is how you use decorators. So here the decorator column simply shows that this is the column of our entity, or the column of our table. Okay, so the column, we'll call it title. Let me use small letters. Call it title. Title will be of type string. Right. And we'll add some description of the thing that you want to do. So that will also be a column. We call it description. The description will simply be what you actually want to do as a to do. Okay, so call that that. So we have created a string. So what we have done here is that we have created a class. Okay, we have created a class which represents an entity in our database, right? Which is called do. So the next thing that we should do is let's set up okay, let's see our list of what to do. So let's set up our DDOs. Okay, so to set up our DDOs, it's a pretty easy thing. So a DDO, as I've said, is just something that will actually carry our data, right? We'll use it to be carrying data different across different classes or different services or different components, right? So to set up our DDO, it's pretty easy. So our DDO actually contains the very same entities that we actually had. Okay, so for example, for DDO entity, we had all these three entities. So I'll copy these two. I'll leave the primary column because this will be auto-generated. The primary column, that's our ID or the primary key. It will be auto-generated in our database. So the files that won't be auto-generated are these two, right? So we don't need the column decorators. With DTOs, they actually have their own decorators, right? For example, this is a string, so you add a decorator, is a string, okay? So is a string, okay? So this is not how it's written. So is string is a string. Okay, so this is not actually coming up, so let's just explicitly import it from class validator. So what is happening here, we actually don't have the class validator yet, so let's install our class validator. So we'll go to NestJS and search for class validator. Okay, so class validator, so this is a pipe. Okay, so what does it do? It is actually used to validate our different fields in our classes. Okay, so that's what the class validator do. It's a type of a pipe. Okay, so what will happen is mu DTO matumuja this gavanga had a string like this. So this will validate to make sure that the particular entity, the particular attribute is indeed a string. Okay, so class validator among to actually make sure with the data that is being sent as it has been defined. For example, what am I define string, and it will just make sure with the we are really sending a string. All right, so we simply need to install the class validator dependency. So we'll go to our installer right here. Let's paste and click enter. Okay, so these are simply pipes, okay, used for validation. So whenever you want to validate, you use the pipes. Okay, one of the pipes is the class validator, which we are actually going to use right now with our DTOs. All right, so let's wait until it installs. So we'll wait until it installs. Manual in essence this string, so we need to add a validator is string, and this and the description should also be a string. But let's wait for it to install so that we can actually import those, because right now they can't actually work. Okay, so the installation is done. So let's import this. Let's import this from okay, from class validator, and also okay, that's also a string. So we have imported this from class validator. Now we have our DTO. So shortly I'll be showing you how you actually use these. Okay, but for now let's configure our to do module to make sure that it's actually also importing the type_rm configuration, because in here we also want to actually work with the database, right? So we'll make sure that it's also working with that in here. So we'll run the type_rm config command. So basically that will be in the imports. Okay, so the imports is an array of imports. it has a comma right there. So line type rm config. Okay, with the capital letter T. It's not type orm module right there. Okay, dot for loot or for feature. Okay, so what we'll do is right here we'll pass in the entity, right? So it's the to do entity right here. Okay, you can also configure this type variable module dot for loot. You can also configure this as before with the configuration, right? So this is actually optional. You can actually add this or not, okay, because we have already done that before. Okay, let's see. So we need a comma right here, comma separated. Then okay, so I've already done this in actually up to JS, okay? But you can also add this on the module level, okay? But then what we are saying here is that now we are trying to pass in the configuration and we are telling it that the feature is to do. That's our entity. And in addition to that, we also need to introduce our entity in our configuration, which is the type rm configuration under entities, okay? So you must also pass our entity in here, okay, which is the to do. Okay, so basically after passing the entity here, it means that now our entity is supposed to actually reflect in our database, right? It's now supposed to reflect. So we have file detected. Okay, so we have an error in the update to do DTO. Okay, so let's go and check it out. So we're having errors in a file that we never touched. So let's just simply delete this wherever they came from. Let's just delete the whole update DTO. We'll fix that later on. So let's see. I think there are no errors now. We can just simply start our server just to make sure. Okay, so now that we have actually configured our type rm, our entity is now supposed to reflect in our database. Okay, that's essentially what's supposed to happen. Okay, so what is this to do? Is not a module. Okay, so because we have deleted the different stuff, so we need to make it a module by exporting something from there. So import, we export update DTO, right? We just export something blank. Say class must start with capital letter. So export update DTO from there. Okay, so to make that a module. Okay, so unable to connect to the database. So access denied for root at localhost using password, yes, and stuff. Okay, so now we have a problem with our configuration. So let's check it out. I think it might be the issue about the password because I don't remember actually setting a password. So let's try to remove that password. Okay, so there we go. We have removed the password and now we're actually able to actually go through. So let's go check out our PHP my admin. Let's go check if our table has actually reflected. So I've created it to do entity or to do table. Need to go make sure it's actually reflecting. Okay, so it's not reflecting, which means there's actually a problem with our setup. So let's check it out again. So it's to do app db. Okay, so it's localhost root mysql. Okay, so let's try to land the server just to make sure. All right, so the server has run. So let's check if we have our entity configured. All right, so our entity is still not there, so let's go check how we have configured our entity in our code. So this is our to do entity right here. So this is our entity. Okay, so we are missing one more thing. We need to add one more decorator. So we need to add one more decorator up here, showing that this is actually an entity. All right, so check there, entity from type rm. All right, so let's save that. Okay, so let's go check again if it has been configured. Let's refresh. Let's check it. Oh yeah, there we go. So now we have our entity or our table created using type rm to our database. So this is our table. Okay, so we have a to-do ID, we have a title, and we have a description. So those are our columns as we defined in our entity with type rm. Right, so basically this is how you actually create the entities. All right, this is how you create the entities, how you connect your uh, database with your application using type rm. All right, so as you can see right here, we have killed the entire need for actually writing a whole query just to create a table in our database. Instead of us writing the query, my SQL query is like create table, specifying the table columns, specifying the constraints. We have actually simplified all that to a simple class. Okay, here it is. Okay, so now we'll continue from here. Okay, so just a recap of what we have done. Okay, so what we have done, okay, so first of all, so I'll explain this in detail so that we add together. So tuambira tabanga create database yatu using MySQL and using XAMPP. Okay, after installing XAMPP, we have started the MySQL and the Apache server. Okay, so that our local machine can behave as a database server. Okay, so I've set up type rm. Okay, I mean as it tandiza kujosa the need for writing queries. Okay, so we'll not need to write queries, and everything else will be writing code watu. Okay, so my tables are two kabina my entities, they'll be represented using a class. Okay, simple classes will represent my entities art. Okay, so tabanga set up my DTO omwe amabanga carry data through out our application. Okay, so we want to transfer data, let's say from a particular module to another module, or if from a particular control, let's say from a controller to a service, we'll use a DDO. Right, we'll use a DDO. Okay, let's say for example per controller button we are handling some sort of information coming from the client. Information jadema ilowesa mu DDO. Okay, ndumabanga ndukumpanga kaya around DDO, let's say kakumpitiza ku service or wherever we want to use it. Okay, so I've set up entity. Okay, so I have set up the DTOs. Okay, so this was to do. Okay, okay, so now what we need to do is actually create mallouts and create a CRUD operation. Okay, so basically tufuna divanga save into our database, and we should also be able to actually retrieve all the elements from our database. Okay, so that's what we are going to do. We will create those two routes. Okay, so if you remember in the previous video, I said that all the routes amu application yatu kabina ma endpoints. Okay, onse amaka mu controller. Okay, so mu controller ndimwe mwedizitani muzikama routes atu. So command jenda banga ya NestJS resource to do. Okay, imatipangira to create a default controller. Okay, so as you can see here, this is our default controller. What's happening in this controller is that we have a constructor right there. So we are calling the to-do service. Okay, so we are importing the to-do service, or others you can call this like an inheritance of a sort. Okay, so we're inheriting the to-do service, which is this, the to-do service right here. So what it means is that in the controller we can actually access whatever is in the to-do service, the methods in the to-do service, because we have actually connected with it in the constructor. Okay, so for example, about to banga post. Okay, so this is a post request. Okay, so this is an HTTP method using the post decorator, as we discussed in the part 1 of the video. So we have created we are learning this method right here, create. Okay, so what it's saying is that from the request there will be a body. Okay, so you take that body, whatever elements are in that body, pass them to the DTO, okay, which is called create DTO. Okay, so now what we are doing is we are returning this dot. So we are now going inside the to-do service. Okay, so in the to-do service there's a method called create. Okay, so we are passing the create DTO as an argument to this as a parameter to this create method. Okay, so if you go to definition, see that this create method is in the to-do service. Okay, so we are able to interact with the to-do service because we have actually connected it with it in the constructor, right? So whenever you hit that endpoint, you receive this action adds a new to do. Okay, so we can test out these controllers. Okay, we can test out this controller by using what we call Postman. Okay, so we'll use Postman to actually test out this controller. So if I'm not mistaken, in our last video we actually went through installing Postman. Okay, so what you do is you go to whatever browser of yours, you download Postman from the official website. Okay, so let's test out this endpoint, okay, using Postman. Okay, so it's to do and it's a post. Okay, so to do and a post. So we can also add additional arguments here. We'll say that it should be /create. Okay, so this means that we'll be going through, we'll do HTTP, and then we'll type in localhost, and then we'll set the port of our server, and then we'll write /to-do/create. Once we do that, now we'll be able to activate this particular method. Okay, so let me demonstrate that. We open Postman. Okay, so always remember that our application is running on port I think it's port 3000. Application is running on port 3000. So let's wait for Postman to open. So if you go to main, you can see that it's running at port 3000. So that's the port that we'll be using, okay, to hit that particular endpoint. So let's wait for Postman to actually open. Okay, so Postman is actually open. So we go to Notepad. Yeah? So you go on the controller, get from Notepad. Okay, so what we'll do here is we'll create one request. So you right click, you add a request. This request will be for creating. This will be create to do. Okay, so it will be a post right there. You can save it, and we'll have another one which will be where's that, add a request. Get or so this one will be a get. Okay, so yeah, we are done. So we'll hit that particular endpoint, http/3000. Okay, so we'll hit, let me just recall for you guys. So we'll hit the /to-do then /create. After that, we'll be able to activate now this particular method right here, the create method. Okay, so /to-do/create. So when we hit enter, we see this action adds a new to do. So as you can see now, it has gone through the create, gone through all of this, and gone through the create method in the service, and then the service is actually printing out this statement. Okay, so what we'll have to do is, instead of printing out this statement, we should actually get the details of our to do, all right, from the body right here, which is passed into the DTO, and actually save it to the database. Okay, so that's what we'll actually have to implement right now. So all these right here, you can actually move them. We'll not use this. Okay, so let's clear out some parts of the code. We'll not do find one update. I guess this will actually incorporate them into another video, but as of now, let's do this. Okay, so let's create okay, so let's save this particular to do. All right, so in our service, so first things first, we must actually introduce the what we call a repository, right? We must introduce what we call a repository. So to do that, we'll create a constructor right here. Okay, so we'll create a constructor. Okay, so in this constructor, we'll inject, okay, using the add decorator, we'll inject repository. Okay, so we need to add the add decorator and inject repository. So what we are doing here is that we are trying to add our to-do entity into the particular service. Okay, so it's a to-do entity, right? It's right there. So it's injected, and let's create the private. Why is this guy complaining? No, we don't need to create private method. Ah, shit. So we'll call this private read only. Private read only. User repository. So the repository in talking here is actually the to-do repository. Right, so we add the to-do repository right there. Okay, and well, there'll be no any implementation here. Okay, so we save it. So what we are doing here is that we are adding the to-do to this service, right? So what the repository does, okay, so this is a type ORM library, or we are getting this from type ORM. So what this does is that it gives us the ability to actually use those CRUD operations on our entity. Okay, for example, like to save, to update, create, and all those stuff, right? Create, update, delete. This guy is the one which enables us to actually have those capabilities, right? So in essence here, what is happening is that we have our database to our left, right? We have our database to our left, or our entity to our left, and we have the user repository, or the repository, to just say that. Okay, so let's not call this, let's give it something. Let's call it a to-do repository to make it actually more viable. So we have the database this side, we have the repository on the center, and we have the clients on the right. Okay, so for you to actually create, save, or do all those methods on your database or your entity, you will need to go through the user repository. Okay, so in essence, that's how the whole process works. Okay, so let's continue. So what we'll do here is that we must actually save to our database. Okay, so what we'll do here is that so basically let's return. So this dot, okay, so we'll do the to-do repository, we'll do the to-do repository dot save. Okay, and we'll pass in we must pass in the create DTO, right? So create to do detail right then. Okay, so let's try this out and check it out if it actually works. Okay, so let's go postman. So in our body, okay, so we have a body right here. So we'll pass in raw data, which is in JSON format. So basically what you are passing is we are passing the title in small letters, remember. So you are passing the title. Okay, so you're passing in the title. Okay, so let me check. So let me check the format of a body. Yeah, so this is the format. So we post title. The title will be purchases, right? So let's say buy things, right? Buy things. I know this is actually not making sense, but bear with me. So you add the description. The description should be something like buy groceries from the market, right? Buy the groceries from the market, and let's actually try to send it. Okay, so there we go. So it's returning the very same thing, because of what we are returning, we're just returning the very same thing that it has actually saved, right? So it has retained the very same thing. So let's verify to check if it's actually being saved in our database, right? So we go to our database right there. So let's refresh our database. All right, so as you can see, it has actually been saved, right? So the ID is 0, we have the title, and we have got the description. Okay, so now this means that we're actually able to save things in our database, right? So we can add more to dos like get home. Okay, so go home as soon as I return. Okay, so we can save that. Okay, so we send. It seems that we have an internal server error, so let's check out the logs first time. So there's a duplicate primary key, right? So there's a duplicate primary key, so we must actually make our primary key to auto increment. Okay, so to achieve this we must actually okay, so let's go to our entity right there. Okay, so this was a primary column. Okay, so we must make it auto generated, right? So we'll call the decorator, we say primary generated column. Okay, so this says that the column should be automatically generated, right? So let's save that. Let's send. So what else do we have now? Let's check out. Oh, so it's actually loading, so let's wait for it. There we go. So let's send. So there we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. So the primary generated column have been primarily generated. Okay, so that's with the get home, and we can add another one. Let's say shuffle. Okay, I don't know what this is supposed to mean, but as soon as I receive, I shall shuffle. Okay, so if you send, that one has also been saved, right? So if you go to your database and you actually refresh, okay, so you can see that all the three records have actually been added, right? And the ID is now being successfully auto generated, right? And another thing that I wanted to teach you guys is something to do with the UUID, right? the UUID. Well, okay. What happens with the UUID? It creates a very complicated ID. Okay, so we'll look about that in later videos. For now, I think let's keep things simple. So now that we have actually managed to actually save everything else, let's try to actually get all the let's get all the records from our database, right? So we'll modify our layout. We should be using a /o. Okay, we'll be using a /o. Let's save. So if you go to get all, right, so it'll be something like localhost 3000, okay, slash to do /o. Okay, so if you send this, see that this action returns all to do, right? So let's implement the returning of all to do's in our to do service, right? So you go find all, you go to definition right there. So this is part we it. This is what is being returned. So let's remove this and actually add in and actually return stuff from actually the database, right? So to do that, we'll simply do this. Okay, so this is the command. So this dot to do repository, okay, dot find all. Where's find all? There's no find all. Dot find, dot find. So it'll be dot find all. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it, right? So you click save and let's go try to find all the elements from our database. Click send. Well, still the server is still loading. Server still loading. The server still loading. There it goes. Just then you click send. There we go. Now we have an array of all our elements in the database. Okay, so essentially this is how you actually save and retrieve from the database. Okay, so yeah, so this marks due to time, this is almost like 57 minutes, so this is already a lot of time. So basically this is essentially how you actually work around with creating and retrieving data from the database and actually connecting to the database and actually using type ORM. Okay, so yes, this is how everything else is done. I hope you actually forgive me for the errors that we are actually facing or we no longer face as we are going through. That is because this entire thing is not actually something that is actually the a plan there's a script of what to do or where to do. No, this is actually me actually coming down coding and actually teaching you all the concepts, okay, that I actually know to actually get things done. Okay, that's why we actually face errors, and actually errors are actually good things because you face an error and because let's be honest here, you can never be a programmer without facing errors, right? So you gotta face those errors. That shows that you're actually doing in the work. Okay, so basically, yeah, this is what we have done so far. Okay, this is what we have done so far. So I guess this can mark the end of this video, but next in the next video we'll have to look at a couple of things. We'll have to add in more of the CRUD operations, right, like to update, to delete, and all those things. And we'll also need to add in some validations. We also need to document. Okay, documentation, we'll use what we call Swagger. So we'll document all our APIs, our backend, we'll easily document it with that. So what I can say is we still have a lot to actually cover, right? But then right now with what we have created right now, you can actually go around, you can create, try it out, create more modules right there. Okay, you create more modules, try to connect the modules, try to create more endpoints. All right, but as of now I would say that this should actually mark the end of the video. But just as I said, let's not forget to actually like, follow, and actually subscribe to the channel. Okay, so the rule is remain the same. If we reach 100 views, I create a new video. Right, so if we don't, well, I guess we know the outcome. So I hope this video is actually helpful. If you have any ideas or areas where you'd like some help, please state so, or if you feel like there are places in the video or the presentations that need to be fixed, okay, like the way I'm presenting, please also say that in the comment section. That will actually go a long way in actually improving the videos, so that you guys can actually get the most from the videos. All right, so with no further ado, I think let's end the video right here.